How about that? I'm trying to get these lights out of your eyes. They'll still shine off my head, which there's nothing we can do about that. So yeah, I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. I decided to make that the title of this, and I'm not really that mad. I did just release a video where I talk about it a little bit because I watched something that really pissed me off. And the thing is, I mean, I'm kind of ruining the video, and now you won't watch it, but you should watch it anyway because I'm awesome. But I'm listening to this guy that I normally watch videos, from, and he's interviewing this guy, Aaron Knightley. I have no clue who the hell the guy is. And he starts talking about, escaping his job, all that kind of stuff. I was like, okay, I'm on board, right on. And then he starts talking about this idea that, he never was afraid of failure, never was afraid of what other people thought, never afraid of risk, all that kind of stuff. And already the alarm bells are kind of going off in my mind. Well, this dude has a particular temperament, which is great for him. And he also says, well, I don't believe luck exists. And he says this a number of times. I'm like, seriously, dude, okay, fine. And, the more that I watched, the more it was like pretty much this moralizing of not just mindset, but moralizing of temperament. Like, unless you think like unless you feel like him, then there's something wrong with you. Like, you're defective. And, I'm not sure if I'm going to get, just fuck that shit. The guy's just an asshole is honestly what my take was. But it was worse than just he was being irritated, being irritating, but he was like gaslighting people. He's gaslighting at that point, because what he's telling you is that, like, well, for example, like, luck doesn't exist. Well, sure it does. Sure it does. My friend Brian has this great channel title. It's a great channel too. It's called Stochastic Agency. If you're a role-playing gamer, go check it out. And stochastic means random. And I'm not mansplaining that to you. I had to go look it up because I had no freaking idea what the word meant. Because Brian is very smart, much smarter than I am, I imagine. So Brian Greger has a great gaming channel. But that's a great title, and it's a great way of looking at a lot of life. The fact that, you're taking agency, you're doing something, you're taking the bull by the horns, and that's what Brian's take was for role-playing games, is you're not just sitting there letting things wash over you, like just standing there waiting for somebody to tell you what to do. You're taking action. And in your life, same thing, take action. Go do the thing, whatever the thing is that you want to do. But it's stochastic. There's a certain amount of randomness associated with it. In the games, of course, we're rolling dice. I should have a dice here to just hold them up and say dice, because I love dice. We'll get to that. Yeah, but sometimes just luck happens. And to say that the people, I mean, there's a thing called survivor bias. And the people that have succeeded, have made it in whatever it happens to be, very often have this bias because they were the ones that made it. And a lot of them just got some lucky breaks. And I'm not saying they didn't work hard. They absolutely did, most of them anyhow. But for every person that makes it at that incredible level, there's hundreds or thousands that don't, that are doing the same thing. This is not to say don't try. I'm not saying, just say, oh, well, the hell with it, forget it. But to discount that entirely is, it's disingenuous in the extreme. And it's one thing to tell people, hey, you know what? Go try anyway. Because if you don't try, you're not going to get anything, for example, if I want to be in a really successful band, and at this point, at 57, unless they come knocking at my door and say, hey, Ivan, we think you're great. I did a sub gig last night. They thought I was great. I mean, it was awesome. I'm not bad. But I don't know that some band that's going to, give me a salary that I can live on is going to show up and knock on my door and say, we need you right away. You're going to have to work for that sort of stuff and put in the effort. But there is no guarantee that it's going to happen for you. It's just not. I know plenty of musicians that are awesome that, they just never really got signed, or they never had that lucky break. I know a lot of guys that are actually making a living doing it, but you know what they're doing to make a living at music? They're giving lessons. They're driving up, sometimes our rich kids' homes to teach them, drums or guitar or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's awesome. But, they've made their own success in that manner, but they didn't catch the lucky break and, become the next whomever. I'm at a loss. Well, the next Doug Pinnick. We went and saw King's X, if you can't tell, the other night. They were freaking awesome. Doug is 75 years old. And I think Ty Tabor, the guitar player, is 64, drummer somewhere in between like 69 years old. They put on a hell of a show. And 75, he doesn't look 75. So I hope I'm still rocking, at that age. Anyhow, where was I going with all this? So yeah, it pisses me off that, so many people just kind of gaslight or just gloss over that and tell you that, well, that's not really important. And that's insane. That's insane. That's one of the reasons I'm mad as hell. And why I think I'm going to start speaking my mind more. Susan, my girlfriend, said she took a look at some of my older videos from, when I was just talking about role-playing games. And she said, you know what, you were, far more yourself, because I've been trying some editing things. I've been trying and discarding different ways of making videos. And discarding more the scripting thing than the editing thing. Because I think sometimes taking out some of the ums and ahs and where I go off on a tangent is merciful to the viewer, because if you've been around for a while, I can go off on a tangent. But she said, you were opinionated about things, and and that's true. And one of the things that's happened in my dotage, in my old age, and in recovery as well, is I started to be a little bit kinder. I started to realize or reacquaint myself with the idea that being dogmatic is not a good way to go. That very often there's a lot of nuance. Now, I knew this was going to happen. We have to go get Rescue Pie because he's on the bed. He can't get off. Hey, quit barking. And because he's so little. Piper, you're not supposed to be on the bed. Get out of there. Hey, buddy, did you want to get down? He wanted to get down. Not sure if he's going to want me to pick him up, but we'll find out. Anyhow, where was I going with all that before I was so rudely interrupted by dogs? Boy, now it's hard as. Oh, well, see, yeah. So there's a lot of nuance in what's going on, and sometimes it's just my opinion or my preferences aren't the only ones, and I had to remember that there were bigger things for me to look at, or there was a much larger field. And I'm not talking about truth being relativistic and, well, your truth, that's your truth, man. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. I'm talking about the idea that very often there's a lot more than meets the eye, and you have to take a bigger look at other people's perspectives, at other people's experiences, all that kind of stuff. Very often in recovery, I learned to stop being so militant about, let's say, like atheism, because the beliefs of other people were working for them, and it was important for me not to mess with that. And I took that seriously. And so in that regard, like, I've kind of mellowed out in my old age. However, I think there is definitely a time for speaking your mind and for being a little more, taking a stand one way or the other. And one of the things I've done on this channel as of late, and I think for a while, is I kind of got a little bit too wishy-washy. And that doesn't mean that I want to go out and become like an asshole and be extraordinarily opinionated about stuff. But if there's something that bothers me, or if I have a real strong opinion about something, I think I'll start to say it a little bit more often. Very often when you do something like this, you get a little worried about being too polarizing and about offending too many people, or not offending, but just, rubbing them the wrong way, or saying something that they might find objectionable because, well, so, I have to, make sure that I have an audience. It's like, okay, well, if you don't like me, that's okay, because there's a lot of other people out there. It's okay. It's, no shame, no foul. But I think being a little bit more true to what I actually believe, or speak my mind a little bit more, is important. So yeah, getting back to these freaking people, anytime that you do something to improve yourself, now, I don't want to say it that way. If you got to the point where I am, where you're like, I'm not, this isn't really working for me. The job thing is not really cutting it. I really want to do something else. There are no shortage of people that you're going to encounter immediately, especially if you start searching for anything. They're going to tell you how to do it, the right way to think. It's maddening. I mean, just type those search words in your YouTube box and wait, and you're going to get the deluge of crap. And it's hard to discern at first. Well, what's true and what's not true. And if you're like me, you're a little cynical. But there's that other part of somebody that, people that wants to believe that perhaps there's, some way, something that's true, or something that can help them in that manner. And, so you can, a lot of people have these great fine sounding arguments. That sounds like something out of the Bible, doesn't it? They're able to deceive you with fine sounding arguments. I read the New Testament too many times, man. Back in the day when I was doing that, but they're able to deceive you with fine sounding arguments, and a lot of the things they say sound right. They sound, they seem to make some kind of sense, but there's such a culture of shame that comes along with that. That if you're not hustling, if you're not grinding, if you have any sort of doubt, or you're afraid to take some kind of risk, or if you're afraid of what people might think of you, or you're afraid, what might happen, all that kind of stuff, that somehow this is a moral defect. And that's, frankly, bullshit. And, part of that is just temperaments. I mean, like biological temperaments. There has actually been a lot of studies lately, none of which I can name, about the neuroscience of different people having different levels of excitation based on neurotransmitters, and like how long and how excited the synapses and the cells get, all that kind of stuff, how you respond to stimuli, how quickly, how much stimuli it takes to fire the neurons, and then how much your neurons fire, and all this kind of stuff. But in other words, there are different temperaments, and a lot of them are biological to a large extent. And then, of course, there's all the conditioning we get as kids, and all the things that happen in our life that can make us much more risk averse or completely immune to that stuff. I mean, just think of the people that lived through the Great Depression. My mom kind of lived through the tail end of some of that. Her parents did. And she's crazy. She goes to the store and she would buy case and case and case of stuff when it was on sale, and put it in the basement because, what if something happened? And, we had this big giant chest freezer in the house full of stuff. It's crazy. She would go so far as to, they would have a limit on how much you could buy. And she would go so far as to put on a different, outfit. Dirtbag frames and voices, yeah. And there's an awful lot of nepotism. There's an awful lot of nepotism involved in that success as well. My point with the kind of hoarder mindset is, it's not just the people are crazy. It's that they went through a situation. They went through a period of time where there was a lot of scarcity, and that scares the shit out of them. We lived through the blizzard of 78. I thought the blizzard of 78 was awesome. I was 10 years old. I don't think we went to school for well over a week here in Connecticut. And, where drifts are ridiculously high, and we're hiding and throwing ice at cars and whatnot, and, being little shits. But it was fantastic. But we didn't have water, running water in my house for over a week. We were melting snow and on the wood stove and all that kind of stuff. And it was because, we had an electric pump for our well, no pump, no water. And so to this day, or at least, for a long time after that, anytime a storm was predicted, my mother would fill up every pot in the household with water, and the bathtub. It's that kind of conditioning. But yeah, there is an awful lot of nepotism. Just reading that. Oh yeah. And here's the thing, it's just one of those things where you have to be honest. I believe, as a critical thinker, it absolutely pays to be 100% honest and take a full inventory of everything that's going on. Whenever you're trying to, make any kind of change in your life, or you're just trying to assess where you are, and it doesn't, anything you're trying to accomplish, whatever happens to be, learning to play the guitar, or, bass guitar, because that's much cooler, all those kind of things. Launching a new role-playing game, and just figuring out how am I going to make this work. You take stock of everything, and you take inventory of what's going on with you internally. What can I withstand? Do I need more encouragement? Do I just absolutely have no skills? Do I need to learn these skills? Do I need to get some kind of guidance from somebody? Am I the kind of person that's going to need some encouragement? Oh yeah, Les Claypool, awesome. We saw Primus a little while ago too. And Flying Frog Brigade a couple of years ago. But what's going on? What's going on with me? What's going on with my financial situation? What are my resources? But you also need to take stock of everything that's external. And being rather stoic, even though it's been kind of bastardized lately. And I didn't realize I was being stoic till I looked into stoicism more. But now you look at all these things that you cannot change. And things that you cannot change is, the playing field is not level. Nepotism is a real, actual thing. There are people that start with an advantage one way or the other in terms of just sheer raw talent, or they start with, a wealthier family. There were the kids that I went to high school with that really got a lot of attention paid to them by the guidance counselors and everybody else. I really didn't. And part of that was because their parents were, pushing on them. And part of it is because a lot of their parents were wealthy. Like the rich kids got a lot of attention. And this is, rather than judging it and say, well, this is evil or bad or anything like that. I mean, we can judge that later on. But when it comes to what am I going to do about me, my situation, just be aware that it's happening. Just be aware that there is a phenomenon called persistence. I think I call it resilience in a short, which is stupid. I'll get to shorts in a while. But there's a phenomenon called persistence, and it's well documented that people tend to stay somewhere around the same socioeconomic status as their parents. And countries have various persistence scores attached to them. And I think the United States is somewhere in a middling. I mean, upward mobility is tough in the United States. It's a lot easier in some other countries. I think there was a Nordic country that was really, really easy to get ahead. But there are a lot of countries where there's a heavy level of persistence, which means you're not very likely to get very far beyond where your parents were. And this goes so far, and I forget, there's a video, I should link to this. It was a great video where it talked about this concept, where they looked at the people that got into Cambridge and the preponderance of certain last names that were the last names of the guys that conquered England and put together some, treaty or pact or whatever, some kind of document hundreds of years ago or 1,000 years ago. And there's still, based on the occurrence of that last name in the population, more people going to Cambridge than there should be because of that much percent. It's a real freaking thing. This doesn't mean that things are impossible. It just means this is something to be aware of. We're not all going to start off with the same starting point. And and then there's just the role of luck. And I talked about in the video, which you should watch anyway. Just think of things like Star Trek. There's various different versions of the story, but essentially at one point the fate of Star Trek was in Lucille Ball's hands, and she said, "Oh, go ahead, continue the show." That was it. Nothing else. People did a lot of work on that, but there was that one moment of luck where if she blackballed or said, "No, I don't think this is good," that would have been it. No Star Trek. And how much poorer our lives would be for that. So thank you, Lucille Ball. And I love Lucy, by the way. Great show when I was a kid. They could smoke. They smoked. Can you believe that? I haven't smoked for over 12 years now, which is awesome. Anyhow, let's get back to stuff. Enough patting yourself on the back, Ivan. But there's another story about Hiroshima. I forget the name of the town that it was supposed to be. Never give up. Absolutely. I was a gifted child too. There was the town that was supposed to be bombed instead of Hiroshima had been visited by one of the guys in the military that was in charge of determining what town was going to be bombed. And I think it might have been Kyoto or something like that. And he said, "You know what? It's such a beautiful city. I really don't want to bomb it. Can we bomb Hiroshima instead?" Okay. Luck. Or Nagasaki was even worse because the city that was supposed to get the bomb dropped on it, it was bad weather. So they just went to Nagasaki. It was like no, it's not. Okay. That's too bad. I just didn't accept a call from my girlfriend. Hopefully, I'll be able to get back to her later. She's on a yoga retreat right now. It was pretty egregious that I just dismissed that call, but I'll call her back. But so there's so many times when there's just plain old dumb luck, and just not refusing to acknowledge that's part of what happens in success is it's disingenuous. It pissed me off to see that happen. And in this particular video I watched, and actually in the comment sections afterwards, a couple of people were taking, umbrage with some of the stuff he said, and him saying pretty much, well, you have a mindset problem. You need to change your attitude. And listen, I get it. I understand that if you have a real defeatist mindset, that can be a real problem. We all know people that are just super freaking miserable. We do. And they just, everything's negative. I fight that tendency in myself sometimes. In my step writing group, with some of my friends in recovery, yeah, my friend Troy said, "Well, you're a resident pessimist." I like to think of myself as realistic. But there's people that take that, and make it an art form, and nothing's possible. And they always see the fault or the problems in everything. Intelligent people do that an awful lot, by the way. I'm fairly smart, so I can fall into that same trap. Okay, so there is a grain of truth in this idea of having a good mindset in terms of wanting to be able to do something. If you're always coming up with reasons why you can't, well, you're just not going to put the effort in. There's a bit of truth to that idea that where you create your own luck. In other words, if I'd like to win the Powerball, I got a Powerball ticket, I haven't checked yet, and if I don't play Powerball, well, I can't win. The likelihood of me winning Powerball is, I've said before, it's a little bit less likely than me being eaten by a shark in here right now in this kitchen while I'm filming this video for you guys. But it's possible. But with anything else, you can't possibly succeed at anything if you don't participate. So there's some truth to that. But saying that, it's just your mindset and that there's no such thing as luck whatsoever, it's not true. It's just not true. So, that goes back to having this honest inventory. Here are all the factors. And then you can proceed. And you don't necessarily, you're not guaranteeing success. You're just making things a lot more likely. It doesn't mean that it's actually going to happen, whatever it might be. Look at all my friends that are much more successful musicians than I am, but still what they're doing is, playing in a lot of bands that come around and they're giving lessons. They're not on tour. They haven't got to the Hutch Hutchinson, point, or the Les Claypool thing where you get discovered and all that stuff. That's just, them's the breaks, kids. And it's not because they're less talented or didn't put in the same amount of work. I have a lot of friends that really, just gave it their all. Anyhow, that's kind of where it is with that. It's been interesting. I've been making shorts lately, and I've had some of the shorts I just do that are just like hey man, don't give up, and that kind of stuff, because I think it's important for people to hear. I really do. It's not a very profitable niche to make shorts about, but man, we just need some more encouragement in life. We really do, especially if you're like me, and not everybody has that hustle, go, I don't care, I'm just gonna go for it mindset. Just scare the dogs. Some people don't. And, they kind of need that, like every day, hey man, it's going to be all right. You're doing the right thing. Don't forget that you're, a valuable person. Don't equate your self-worth to your success. And it's a lot more of what that hustle, that culture was going for is, they're moralizing the success, moralizing success. Like, in other words, if you're not successful, there's something wrong with you, and, once again, that's not cool. That's just the same thing as moralizing work that the church started doing. I forget who the person was that really started doing that, where essentially, a man's worth, a person's worth, is based on them putting in hard day's work every day. And, it's like moral. It's morality. That's all you get into heaven. But it's just as toxic and dangerous and downright evil to say that, yep, I agree. I'll get to that in a second. It's just as evil to say that it's just, the mindset thing. And, my squeezing arm, you do bring up a good thing about changing direction. And there's a concept that I thought I'd come up with called adaptive resilience. It turns out there's a book called Adaptive Resilience as well. It's more of a corporate thing. But the idea that, it's not just enough to be persistent, not just enough to persevere, which are different things, and it's not just enough to iterate, where, you're making changes based upon, what's happening, what's working, what's not working, the kind of the negative feedback, guidance system that like a guided missile has. Trying to get to the target. What's the target? Target might be like being able to make enough money at something that doesn't suck, What that thing is, that might change. And I think Seth Godin's the book, The Dip, which gets a lot of press, even though it really doesn't say that much. He talks about this idea that you should quit. If things aren't working out, you should quit. Don't spend all that time on that. You don't spend 30 years doing something that's not productive. Quit things soon. Also, at the same time, sometimes some things take a long time before they germinate and take off. So it can be really tough to figure that out. Like, is this just a time thing, or is this something where it's just not working at all? But yes, it's absolutely, if it's a hard lesson that I've learned is sometimes you need to switch gears. And that's one of the things that I'm doing here. This channel's about me, but I don't like to make this whole video about me. In my own case, I, had a little experiment, as a very, very young man with network marketing. Don't suggest that at all. I was like 20 years old or something like that. But it didn't go well. But I was just very risk averse, very failure averse. The experience kind of stung, and I was convinced that I just don't have what it takes to be an entrepreneur. I don't have that kind of mindset. I don't have that kind of inner grit and tenacity. And yes, there are definitely people that have that temperament from birth. Good for them. They're lucky in some regards. Didn't have that. And so for a long time, like I'm working at various jobs. I mean, I had the state job for a long time until I lost that as an indirect result of active addiction. But then, after I got clean 13 years, 3 months ago now, hooray me. I'm working a bunch of these different jobs, and, I didn't like any of them, but the switch hadn't, gone in my head. You know what? I think you need to do something for yourself. I kept on thinking to myself, I need to get a better job. I need to get a job that I like. And, there was this moment where I said, you know what, that's not really what I want to do. I'd rather, try some things, for myself, even if it's several things, and I have to have several things going on at the same time, than just work for somebody. And that was a huge mindset shift. And it was scary as hell to even consider trying. And I'm talking about doing something, where I'm barely taking any risk at all. The music stuff, I bought some stuff anyway because I wanted it, but I started doing more sound. So I'm actually making money doing, make money playing bass and doing sound. But it's just that the right-wing OSR thing. No, not even close. We can talk about the OSR thing in a second. Yeah, so it's not cool. Let me just, now I got derailed. No, not doing the right-wing OSR thing. There was a time in my life where I was fairly right-wing. And, for a very long time, I would just describe myself as a libertarian, not the Republicans who want to smoke pot, but I still understand a lot of the tenets of it. And I think for a while, I kind of called myself more of a compassionate libertarian. I've since, got more and more hip to the failings of the market as such, and, laissez-faire capitalism, and the fact that things like trickle down in economics just don't work. Libertarian in the U.S. is different than everywhere else. So yeah, exactly. So it's not pure. There are some great books like Libertarianism in One Lesson. There's actually a really good book. I recommend people to read that just to figure out what the fuck they're talking about. Like, what's the actual pure idea? And, I'm talking to a good friend of mine who's much more conservative lately. And I'm talking about this idea because I'm telling him, listen, man, I haven't swung over to like a very extreme side of the other, way, but it's just, and I was swung away from conservatism a long time ago, but there was a time when I was really young where I was very, very liberal. Then I was more conservative. I'm a very staunch independent. I'm a case-by-case kind of guy. But one of the things I want to do as an older person, being 57, is I don't want to be stuck in a mindset. I would like to keep on learning. And, changing your mind, changing your perspective is, I think, a sign of growth and maturity. Because too many people my age and even younger are just stuck. And they can't see anything else. They don't want to hear anything else. That's what happened. I think one of the things that happens with this guy, Aaron Knightley, and I don't want to throw him under the bus because I really don't know him from Adam, is that he's convinced that this is true. And he doesn't want to, anything that interferes with that narrative, he doesn't want to hear. And there were people that were on the other side that were kind of arguing with him in the comments. Anything on that doesn't jive with their narrative, they don't want to hear. That's not a very healthy way to go through life, And as a critical thinker, I reject both of those. But yeah, I started. So I'm having this conversation with a good friend who's much more right wing, and I'm telling him, like, listen, I still think that overall capitalism is probably one of the better forms of government. It still sucks, but it needs regulation because people will take advantage of stuff. It needs some pretty strict regulation, and so you're not going to have a pure. Listen, one of the things I love political science. I got an A in political science. I never took the course. I just wrote all the essays for somebody. This is, yeah. I'm not going to get trapped in centrism either, man. But yeah, it's part of. If I have a belief, I have a belief. But thank you for the advice, my squeezing arm. It was. It's just this is back when I was using, and I was working at the bus company, and this young lady who was very nice was taking a course at Southern, and it was way above her, and so. She said, "Can you write my papers? I'll give you some money." I said, "Sure, I'll do that." And wrote the first paper, and I kind of like just vomited stuff back. And she goes, "I got a C." And my professor said something like that. He's a theoretician. I'm like, oh, okay. So I started writing these very opinionated pieces, and she got an A. And I told her, just listen, just don't talk. You can't talk in class, because the jig will be up. Isn't that terrible? But part of the first rule of like political science is there is no answer. There just isn't. There's no easy answer. The questions are like, who makes the rules? What are the rules? Says who? No freaking answer. There's no good answer for that. So no, I have not turned into right wing, OSR type stuff. And it's correlation does not imply causation, or does not, doesn't confirm causation. And it's too bad that I don't want to go too. It's too bad that like a lot of the OSR has been like super right wing, or somehow they've gotten thrown into the same boat. And as part of it's just age as well. And some people, I don't want this to be a Dungeons and Dragons video, but some people see the old version. Okay, we won't forget to take out the trash cans. Some of the older people like myself, and even a little bit older, they've seen their game turn to something that's completely unrecognizable. And there's a great thing that my friend shared with me the other day, where Rob Kuntz is talking about like what D&D should be, how it should be played, or how it was originally played, and the adventure stuff. It wasn't all this other stuff that it is now. And I don't want to get into that freaking argument or discussion. And the person commented, well, here's somebody that's obviously never played D&D. He was one of the original players. He's in the DM guide as one of the players. But it's too bad that those kind of got like lumped in together. But no, and I still love the OSR games. I don't play them as much, but if I play a game like that, I definitely give me some basic BX, or give me some the game based on it. Give me Lamentations of the Flame Princess or Hyperborea. Those are just both great rule sets, and have at it. I think those are awesome. By the way, I just have not been playing that much lately. The Call of Cthulhu game that we're in, my character's at a point where he's not viable. So I need to get a new one, and it's a matter of figuring out another character. And I should do some more role-playing game videos soon. Right now, I just haven't had a hell of a lot to say. My friend Anthony, the Runeslinger, is putting out some awesome stuff, so check that out. His conversation with Disembowel with Scott Welker I forget Scott's company's name. Really good about things like immersion. So go check that out if you want to hear some like pretty good role-playing stuff. And I know like Brian in the Stochastic Agency channel is putting out some really good stuff as well. Yeah. And, the community is what it is. And I mean, and they're not all like that, not by a long shot. But it's like anything else. Some of the most vocal people are the ones that get all the attention. And if you're to a certain extent, the OSR was and maybe still is a reactionary community. And so when something's reactionary, you're going to get the most extreme voices, and people that tend to be very reactionary and curmudgeonly and whatnot. Well, they're going to be reactionary about all kinds of shit, aren't they? And we'll just leave it at that. But that's That's the way it is. In the meantime, here my, I'm I'm an ally, man. So, things are different. So yeah, that's why I haven't been doing a hell of a lot with role playing games lately, but I really would like to start playing a little bit more. My friend Eloy has gotten over his slump, so we might end up, it's a matter of like coordinating when we can all play, and that's a great thing about the internet is whatever your interest is, you can now find people to either talk, you to it about. I think I'm way late to the party. I haven't forums. I've been around for decades. Or you can do things like Zoom and do it with them, if at all possible. And so playing role playing games is great because you have to find your people, and you have to find your people everywhere in life. And it doesn't have to be a lot of people, but there's people that I call when I have a problem. There's mostly people in recovery that, like, if I'm really stuck, there's some guys that are like my go-to guys. And if you don't have go-to people, get some, because life is going to throw some curveballs at you. And fortunately, Sue is another go-to guy for me. I'm very, very fortunate to have found such an awesome partner. But you need some go-to people in your life. And you need people, depending upon what the subject is, very often you need to get the opinion of somebody that knows what the hell they're talking about in that particular subject. Not just that, but you need to find like alignment. I think alignment's really important. And I don't mean get into an echo chamber, because that can be really dangerous when everybody's not questioning the narrative. You just look at political sides, one way or the other. You can't question the narrative of a particular group. The extremes, and you can't do it because you'll get ostracized. You'll get thrown out. That's stupid. That's poisonous and toxic. That's not what I'm talking about. But some people that are in alignment with you that you can still have discussions with and disagreements with. It's one of the great things about Susan is we disagree about some things, but we really want to know each other's opinions, and we want to know why we think what they do. Why they think how they do, and so we end up having some great discussions. And sometimes they're just there's no real consensus or whatnot, but we talk about that. And getting some people that are aligned with you that you can still have discussions like that, or that's like invaluable. You know what I mean? And so for gaming groups, God, wow, this was circuitous. For gaming groups, it's a matter of getting the right people. Not everybody in the gaming groups that I play with are the same politically, but we're all very respectful of each other. Not all of us have the same interests. Some of us opt out of certain games based upon interests. And so we kind of self-curate depending upon what we're going to play. But we're all able to get along. We all have the personality. And the group has morphed over time. And sometimes I think, depending on situations, it wasn't always the best fit. I don't mean that people are bad people, or that we kick anybody out or anything like that. I think it's just a matter of you're finding the right fit, and sometimes people move off in a different direction, and that's cool too. That's kind of how life works, isn't it? So I don't sound very mad, do I now? I'm supposed to be mad as hell during the whole video. But yeah, that's the thing is I think I'm going to start speaking my mind a little bit more, and figure out how to do that without being. I don't want to be an asshole either, because it's very easy to cross over and become like Howard Stern, and and what have you, and become abrasively opinionated. Joe Rogan, take your pick of abrasive, opinionated people. I can't think of any right now because I don't watch them because they annoy me. Some of them have given me some perspective on things, and then I'm like, okay, well, I'm done with you. But yeah, abrasive opinionated people, not so much. But you don't want to become one of those people, because it's so easy to become one of those people, especially when you get a little bit older, or especially when you really believe something firmly. There are things about recovery that I absolutely believe, and I have to. Sometimes they're very important, because when we're talking about recovery and addiction to drugs, it's like a life or death thing. Like, listen, no shit, no fooling. You're gonna die, dude, unless you quit doing that. But there's other parts of recovery that sometimes it helps to be a little bit less dogmatic about, in terms of say which treatment modality you're gonna use and all that kind of stuff. Doesn't that sound like a big word? Treatment modality. But it's so, you can look around YouTube channels and find these people that are very, very, polarizing. And that gets clicks, that gets views, if you want to be, market yourself in that manner. But there's a part of that that's just, you know, either fake, like, they're doing it on purpose to be edgy, or they're really just, being kind of a jerk. And we all know people like that in our lives, and there's only so much of that. But, I think, in life, not just in having a YouTube channel, you ought to have a set of beliefs that you, I don't want to say are hold like without question, because I think it's always good to like reevaluate what you believe. And I'm not saying you need to stand for something or to stand for nothing, but all of us have like this inner authentic self that either pops out or we kind of start developing it, and things that ring true for us and how we want to live our life and what things are actually important to us. And if you deny that too much just to please other people, just to not risk offending anybody, there's politeness and then there's being a doormat. And I was watching a video of this, don't always compromise or you compromise yourselves. Yeah, exactly. And there's times, last night I played with this band. It was a great experience. We had a lot of fun being the sub bass player for this band. At the end of the night, I bring my tip jar. They had a tip jar, and we get some cash in the tip jar. And she said, well, we generally just give it to the bar. I was like, well, that's not what I generally do. I do this for, like part of my living. And so I got the quarter of the money out of the tip jar, and they did whatever they did. And I could have just as easily said, oh, okay. No. That's not why I do this, kids. I love music, but, if the bartenders were doing great, well, people should tip them. Doesn't that make me sound like an asshole? But people were tipping the band. It said band tips. Hey, go tip the band. My money, dude. But yeah, this might have to be a little edgier. Or just be a little more authentic. There are some things I want to talk about AI just a little bit, because I've used some AI lately. I've used, like I said, way before, early in this live stream, I tried some scripting and stuff like that. And I use ChatGPT has its uses. I'm not one of those people that believes AI is evil. If you close your eyes and wish really hard for it to go away, when you open your eyes, I got news for you. It's still going to be there. I don't want to get too opinionated. I don't want to speak my mind too much, but I have some friends that have lost, that are more in the arts, that have lost business, or it's changed the way they do business. And certainly in being a musician, I can see right now the music that AI can put out is pretty remarkable. It's not 100%, but it's one of those things where you see it. Wow, this could affect me and my life at some point, but it's nothing's going to make that not happen. So it's having kind of, once again, a little bit of that stoic mindset. Or if you want to talk recovery, it's, accepting the things you cannot change the things that you can. How am I going to react to this? Anyhow, without going too far down that rabbit hole, because I don't want to piss people off for something that's not that consequential. So there's things I started using ChatGPT. It's very useful for me to be driving in my car, have an idea, and start vomiting stuff out. And if you've seen how, I can be all over the place in a video or a live stream, oh my God, when I'm just doing that, it's messy. And sometimes I had to tell ChatGPT, stop telling me that it was repetitive or that circle around stuff. I know that. I want you to fix this. And just tell me back what I just said, but put it in an essay form that makes sense and flows, better. And it's good at doing that. If you prompt it correctly, you can get something good out of that. Then it said, well, do you want me to script something? Well, I don't necessarily want a script, but talking points or something like that. And I've seen, I've had it do some things. And so I made some videos where I stayed a little bit closer to, what it spit out. And I didn't like how this came out. There's a couple of them I might actually even take down. Although I really have a thing about not taking down videos. Because I like to see the evolution, the good, the bad, the ugly. I mean, man, there's lots of videos from years ago where I'm freaking high as a kite on opiates, okay? I could take those down. And I said some things that I don't really agree with anymore about role-playing games. It's part of my history. But I didn't like it. It's great for doing bullet points. You have to curate what it says. There are descriptions in my videos that are AI generated that I then like either curate or don't curate. I can either say, that's pretty good, not so good. I put some stuff on my WordPress blog, which I need to start putting more stuff on that was AI generated. And some I'm like, I regret. I'm like, I wish I should have rewritten some of that stuff, but it, got some of my ideas out at the time. So it's one of those things you have to fact check, you have to curate it. It's kind of cool to like have it spit something back out at you that's like that's written, and then you can kind of fix and make it what you want. It's definitely a time saver, and it's certainly a time saver in terms of I just spit out all this raw stuff. Could you please organize it? Really good at that. It's good at looking some stuff up for you. You might have to fact check it. Although very often you can say leave references, so you can click on the references. And, okay, this is right, and so far not so bad. So I've been using it for that, but I'm trying to be careful of what I use it for. But when it comes down to like, do I need to write a description for the video if we've already talked about what it's going to be about, as if chat's another person? No, spit me something back out, and then I'll fix it. So it's a time saver. It's a tool, just like anything else. It can be used for good or for evil. And I discovered the real use for Sora, which is something I had no idea existed until a few days ago. And I saw some, I think a vidIQ video on Sora, and make these little 10-second videos of you. I think it's part of OpenAI, whatever. So you do little. It's actually remarkable. You say 3 numbers, you turn your head this way and that way. And so if you see any of the little shorts I did with me and them, they're just clearly AI. That's all I did. Sora, they're part. I mean, and actually, Sora, I think, is bottom of the barrel AI generation of real people. This is the world we live in, man. This is the world we live in. There's a lot of stuff that can be made to be seem to have happened that didn't happen. Once again, it's one of those inventory things. Be aware of this. Use some discernment, and sometimes, not saying to be a conspiracy theorist, just saying. The Sora thing, I just did some stuff, and I made a bunch of little stupid videos that absolutely tickle the crap out of me. That's the real use for it, is to make stupid, entertaining shit that makes you laugh. The number of videos that I couldn't post because they're me singing love songs to Susan in different accents, dressed in different outfits, are hilarious. I might have to, there's ones, I'm not going to tell you all of them, but there were ones of Dice, and there were ones of Dice, definitely the cyberpunk, far left. We're entering into that, we're here. It's almost here. Cyberspace, I'm waiting to plug myself in. Because, I made these videos of me buff and whatnot, eating ice cream. This is how I maintain my physique. And I'm joking to Susan, saying, listen, why do I need to go work out when I can just have AI do it for me? If I could just plug in there and get transported into that other avatar body, hey, that'd be pretty cool. But we've all read those stories. Forget what the stories about the young woman who was stuck in there forever. And then her psychiatrist had to go in there and get her out because she could afford to be in the AI thing all the time. Would you do that? Would you do that? I would be sorely tempted to do that because I'll tell you what, I love dreaming. I have very vivid dreams, and there's dreams I've had like repeatedly, or they're like variations or continuations of things. And, there's some that's really awful, but there are times like, man, there's something about the dream world that's very, very interesting, and it's very Lovecraftian, isn't it? And I don't know, those depictions of being able to live in those artificial, worlds of virtual reality, that's what word I was looking for. I'd be hard pressed, just saying, I'm just revealing that about myself, hey, think of how buff I would be. Although I started going back to the gym last week, went 3 days, man, I am just not digging it. I don't have the energy. I can't lift anything like what I used to, but it's one of those things. Like if I want to, be in better shape and stay alive and be able to run around and play with my grandchildren and all those cliche things, well, dude, you better lose 50 pounds and get back in shape, and get your cardiovascular stuff back there. So, started to put the effort back in to do that because, 5 years ago, my God, I was in fighting shape. And well, if you watch channel for a long time, you know that up, down, up, down. But I'm fat and happy now in this relationship. What was I saying about the AI? Yeah, so I put up some of the dice stuff, and it's hilarious and concerning and weird. I have no plans to put up tons and tons of AI-generated slop shorts. Every once in a while, if something tickles me and I think it's funny, and I think it's, Susan's texting me and they're about to have dinner. She's going to try to call me later. So I feel kind of redeemed that I'll be able to talk to Susan. I'm not completely ignoring her because that's pretty bad. But I'm not going to make a ton of AI slop. And because I said that, you should pay me. There's super thanks. Sorry, guys. There are guys that do live streams all the time. There's some really good channels. Timothy Ward, if you want to look about like minimalism and escaping your job and all the things he's done to his, I want to say he's a hobo. And the guy's sober as well, talks about that. He's been sober for a long time. But he's decided that's the kind of life he wanted to live. But he's got this YouTube channel and he does live streams all the time. And people, do the super chat thing or whatever like that. And he makes a considerable amount of money that way, And he's not, it's not, what's the word for it? Something panning, not creator panhandling or something like that. But, I don't believe it's that. I mean, if people really want to support his message, I think that's awesome. It's a little bit like Patreon or whatever else and all that kind of good stuff. Anyhow, I got wickedly sidetracked. But it's amazing, like, how these dogs want to get let out. It's amazing how people are able to support creators that they like, and that's cool. Where was I going with the rest of that kind of stuff? Does anybody remember what the hell I was talking about? Do you remember, Pi? Yeah, I'm not about to do a whole bunch of AI shit, but I found certain things very, very funny, very, very entertaining, and so I put them out. But the interesting about that is the video I made of me puking dice, which I had to change the prompt. I said vomiting dice, it said no good, so I had to say it violates our policies. Sora has just as many policies and violation things as does ChatGPT. In fact, one of the things where I was singing a love song to Susan, I wanted to sing it in Rocky Horror garb, and it wouldn't do that. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So it wouldn't put me in Rocky Horror garb. It has the same thing. This may violate our policies against lewd or man, that's too bad. I think I look kind of fetching, dressed like Frankenfurter. But the video I think I put up I don't know, 4 or 5 videos that are AI generated. The video that I put up with me vomiting, and once again I had to all those dice out there, and I'm laughing. So I want to be laughing and spewing dice out of my mouth. It says like dice are nice or something like that. Has gotten more views than any other video I've ever put out, ever. Shorts don't make a hell of a lot of money. I think I've made like $3 off that thing already. It's got something like, the shorts views are counted really strange now, where it's a total number of impressions. Like in other words, if in front of you, that's counted as a view, and then there's, which doesn't count as far as money, and then there's engaged views, which is like you actually stayed and watched the damn thing. And the average watch time is like 15 seconds, which means people are re-watching this stupid video. It's got a fair number of dislikes. It's got, probably more likes than any other video I've ever put out there. It's hilarious. I laughed to myself, oh my God, please, this is not going to be my legacy. It's me vomiting dice. And the one, when they're pouring out of my ears, man, that got people mad. People were furious about that. It still got more likes than dislikes, but people were freaked out by that. It's funny how, and it's hard to know how many people were disliking that. I wish people would comment a little bit more about it. How many people are disliking because it's horrifying, and it's giving them the body horror, heebie-jeebies, and how many people disliked it because it was AI? Because think about it, there's enough people that are so opposed to AI. Once again, You get to this point where it's dogmatic. You're not willing to hear anything else. You've set your mind. AI is evil, and so they reject anything that's made with AI. And I think that's especially unfortunate in, like, say, the role playing game industry, because you got people that are like very, very small role playing game creator. Don't have a hell of a lot of budget. You spent your money on getting the damn thing published and edited and formatted, and you just put the time into writing it. And so your choices are use stock photos, which are freaking dull and unengaging, right? I think Broken Rooms might have done that. It's a great game. If you haven't played Broken Rooms, go play Broken Rooms. Great game. I think it's Gray Malkin Games, although I could be wrong. They also did Desolation. But, your other choice is to pay an artist like my daughter or like some of my good friends thousands of dollars for art, which you probably don't have because you're probably not even going to make a profit on this RPG. Maybe you're just going to break even. Maybe that was your plan the whole time. You don't have the budget like, say, Raji has for Lamentations of the Flame Princess. Don't have that kind of money or clout or anything like that you can toss. And the guy, I give the guy credit in a lot of ways. I don't agree with everything he does or says, but, give him credit. And it's one of those things. It's a great time to bring Raji in because, his thing was like, with his stuff, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, if you don't like it, don't buy it. You don't have to sit there and rail about how awful it is. If you don't like AI, don't use it. And you can vote with your dollars. Don't buy products that are made with it. But you get some poor guy or gal, some poor person that just is trying to put out this game, and you know what? They could get halfway decent art with AI, and to decide that you're not going to buy this thing they put as much effort and money into as they could because of that, that pisses me off. And it's not because trust me, I understand the issue with the artists, and trust me, as a musician, right now recording music, forget it. I don't know when that's going to go away entirely as far as the recording stuff. Performing, maybe. It's just it's unfortunate. So I feel bad for people like that get kind of railed on that much for the AI thing. It's not. It is what it is. Where was I going with this? Raji, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, AI. Is it the devil? Yeah, I don't want to be. I don't want to be the guy that just makes AI videos about dice. But yeah, that's the thing. There's so many people that would reject the video or dislike the video simply because it was AI. And I'd really love. I mean, there's no way I can get the breakdown, but as a truth seeker and critical thinker, and as a researcher and somebody that's just absolutely fascinated with everything. Or at least the things I'm fascinated about, I would love to know what the percentage of people were that rejected those videos because they gave them the heebie-jeebies, and how many people rejected them because it was AI. That'd be fascinating, because I'm really kind of fascinated by the whole, by all kinds of, I guess what discipline is this? Anthropology? Social science? Nah, it's not social science, but why people react the way they do. And, so many times it is a gut level thing. Or it is just a reaction, not a response to. My girlfriend Sue's daughter right now is they're in the phase. No, I don't want to say it like that because that's demeaning. Right now they're very, very anti-AI. And one of the reasons they're very anti-AI is because of the water usage and the power usage that AI produces. And that's interesting. That's a valid point. And so I went and did some research. Well, how much power does it use? How much water is it using? How much is it using compared to other forms of, like, say, data management or anything that involves electronic stuff? How much is it compared to, like, manufacturing, all those kind of things? And so it's one of those things where you put it into context. You can look at it, well, okay, it's using these resources, but it's using that much. And there's other things that you might like. Let's say, let's pick on gaming. And well, you like this stuff, so you're not really going to complain about like the gaming servers or whatever. I'm pulling that out of the air. I have no idea what the stats are, back and forth. But you're because you happen to like that, then you're not going to have a problem with it. You'll bitch about AI. Trust me, I'm not taking a side either way. You'll bitch about AI, but you're not going to, because it's doing something you don't like, or you've decided you don't like it. But you're not going to bitch about the thing that you like, which might be using just as many resources and just be having just as much of a negative impact on the environment, on the resource depletion, all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying this as I'm not taking either side politically or anything like that. It's just about critical thinking, and it's funny how often we are so reluctant to hear anything or that doesn't jive with our narrative, what we want to believe about the world. So many people are going around just believing all kinds of things, and it's just because they want to believe it. Sometimes they want to believe it because they really want to believe it. They want to believe they want to take a stand on something. They know it in their gut. This is true. God exists. I don't get Anyhow, whatever they want to be true, they're not going to entertain or listen to anything else that might say anything different. There's other times that we grew up believing something. We got fed that narrative, and now I believe this all my life. It would be embarrassing to believe anything else. So I'm not going to listen to that. And trust me, I find myself in these traps all the time. And that's one of those things. I think it's part of maturity. And being an honest person, being a critical thinker, is being willing to let go of that and say, okay, let me take another look at the data. Because new information has come to light, man. New information. I need to consider the new information. And so many people just won't do that, and that's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. So yeah, I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore. This has gone on far too long. I thank everybody for watching that did watch. And I will talk to you later, kids. I go watch that video I made talking about some other stuff. And any way you can support the channel, I would really appreciate it, because I really enjoy doing this. And is it going to be my only source of income? Well, that'd be great, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But I really like doing this. And I think, who knows what I'm going to talk about next. Who knows? Nobody knows what I'm going to do next. He's unpredictable. It's ridiculous. All right, kids. I will talk to you later.